Welcome back to the Extra Rep Podcast, guys. I'm Josh.
I'm Liam.
So today we're going to talk about nutrition specifically for fat loss. So we've already talked about nutrition for muscle growth, so I think it's only fair that we talk about nutrition specifically when we're talking about fat loss. So there's going to be plenty in this episode we're going to cover. Obviously, we're going to cover energy balance, we're going to cover protein, we're going to cover, carbs and how they work and what, I guess, the best time is to have them, especially when we're looking at optimizing the body composition. We're going to look at, clean versus, I guess, not clean foods and that sort of thing as well. And then we'll obviously look at being in a fat loss phase shouldn't be forever as well. So we'll cover, we need to have periods in a fat loss phase when we're talking about nutrition, and we can't just diet forever. But the first topic, I guess, always to talk about, Liam, is in terms of calories. Unfortunately, as much as people want to harp on about food quality, there does need to be a balance, of course. But of course, nutrition for fat loss, there needs to be an energy deficit. We do need to be, unfortunately, in a calorie deficit to start seeing some initial weight loss before we start basically talking about anything else.
Yeah, I'd agree, but there are some limiting factors to it as well, like, the quality of food could dictate your hormonal response. Mm-hmm. And I know you hate that thing, people blame their hormones and stuff, but it does correlate to things like ghrelin, leptin, so hunger, satiation, things like that can come into play when it comes to fat loss.
I think that's interesting. I think that's a good place to start, is that a lot of people where, say, for example, certain foods or certain things and hormones playing a part, you will find that, okay, someone might be in a calorie deficit, but two different people can be in the same calorie deficit, right, with different sets of foods.
Yep.
And one person could be, fucking starving all the time.
Yep.
And the next person could be, I'm a little bit hungry, but I'm actually quite content. So
Yep.
Do you want to almost go through that a little bit of what sort of factors food-wise would affect those two people?
I would actually say not necessarily food-wise, even though it is food-wise, but it's mainly around their response to insulin. So blood sugar levels and insulin, and when I used to be metabolically unhealthy, I was like, man, I have a bottomless appetite. What the hell? And this is why you can eat 3 Big Macs and not even feel full, even though it was 1,500 calories. But if you try and eat 1,500 calories of, chicken and broccoli and rice, it's almost impossible.
Yeah, and it's, obviously food quality, especially in today's world, it is a big thing, and so it should be. But I think a lot of people, especially with the rise of the carnivore diet and things like that, people are taking food quality to this crazy obsessive point of don't care about calories, it doesn't fucking matter, you've just got to worry about your food quality and everything else will sort of, go on top of that. And we're not saying don't worry about food quality, we're saying there needs to be an equal amount. There needs to be, okay, how can I get, I guess, the best quality of food and micronutrients inside those current dieting calories that I'm doing, because that's going to give you the best, not only the best fat loss results, but the best body composition results as well, especially when I know most of you are training in the gym as well.
It honestly comes down to periods of tracking and understanding nutritional information. It's really that simple. Someone could be on a 2,000 calorie diet, which could be a deficit to most people. But if you broke that up into 4 500 calorie meals, and they're all, 40 grams of protein, heaps of micronutrients, and then a decent amount of carbs, which is really easy to make in 500 calories, then you'll be like, wait, I ate those 4 meals a day, I'm eating 2,000 calories, but I actually felt like I was eating a lot of volume of food.
And that's when, that's a big one. It's like, a lot of people will be like, I'm always starving, and you will see, the nutrition they're having, and it's like, imagine a big plate, right? And it's like, if you're just going to cover the plate with, potentially let's just say a Macca's Big Mac, right? You're going to cover that, maybe some fries on the side, and you fill up half the plate, right? And it's like, okay, cool. Really not that satiating, unfortunately, just because it's that combination of carbs, fats, and sugar that's going to leave you just wanting more, right? Whereas if you fill that plate with let's just say some chicken thigh, and then some sweet potato, and a big nice micronutrient fueled salad full of vegetables and things like that,
and a 0 calorie sauce.
0 calorie sauce, and then maybe or even some little dash of olive oil or something like that,
exactly.
Right?
Make it delicious.
That would make 500 calories, but it's like you've just doubled the food volume on your plate. So not only from a chewing and satiation perspective, you've got that, but then you've got the addition of the micronutrients, the protein, all these other things that are really going to make a massive difference, especially when it comes to fat loss wise. Fat loss is hard to stick to. We know that, right? So if we can try and hit the nail on the head, and I'm not saying you have to be super aggressive, but would you rather be semi-aggressive, diet for 10 weeks and get it off? Or would you rather be like, I'm just going to be the tiniest bit aggressive, but then have to diet for 20 weeks?
It depends on the person. I mean, some people like the long approach because, and this will sound like a load of shit, but it's true. Some people think that losing weight slowly and longer means it's more sustainable. And I would argue against it. I'd rather you just go hard and aggressive. And then if you're working with a smart coach, we get you out of that. We get you feeling better. We actually start putting on some lean muscle mass and fueling around training and getting you metabolically healthy. You can get people where they're eating 2,500, 3,000 calories a day and they're still losing weight. And some people are like, what? How? And it's like, well, they're moving throughout the day. They're weight training hard. They're sleeping really well. They're not eating dumb shit calories. And what do you know? Body recomp.
Yeah. And like I said, you know, when you said first in the podcast, it just comes from understanding nutrition. So
Yeah.
I think when we're talking nutrition for fat loss, especially if you've tried a fat loss diet before and you haven't understood, you know, calories, that is something that, you know, you need to go through a period of tracking. Like, it's just so big, and I understand people go, oh, I don't want to do this or do that. But the reason you don't want to go through a period of tracking is because, number one, you're probably guilty because you don't realize, you know, you don't want to find out how many calories you're currently consuming. And number two, you think it's too hard, right?
Yeah.
And of course, there's going to be some friction getting at nap and, you know, putting this in or putting something on a scale, but it really actually isn't as bad as you think. And once you do it for a couple of days, it becomes a lot easier. And then you start to understand, geez, if I've been having that much of this or that much of that, and then you'll start seeing the results come through that and you go, oh, okay, this is actually starting to make a bit more sense. That starts snowballing, fat loss starts getting easier, and you start making smarter choices. And then, you know, when you get to a point where, you know, maybe you've just gained a bit of body fat because you've just gone and enjoyed your life, maybe you've gone off to Europe, right, and come back, you can be like, okay, I just know I need to go back to roughly these foods, eat them a majority of the time for 2-3 weeks, and I'll be back to where I want to be.
Yeah. I'll go on a little bit of a side tangent here, even though it's very relatable, but I would say people are scared to actually understand what they're putting into their body. They're scared to see the results. And look, we're scared of a lot of things, right? Like, let's say you've got a bad habit of online shopping as an emotional coping mechanism. You're scared to look at your bank account. You're scared to step on the scale because you're then accountable to your actions for all the food you've ate, however many years. When you look at your food you're eating, you've got this emotional relationship to this 300 calorie latte you get on the way to work every single morning, and that's your only source of happiness that morning. But you come to the realization, shit, that's actually a lot more than I thought. You're accountable for it. But I would argue that us as humans, right, not all of us want to change, and we all deep down know what we need to do to get better. We know that we need to track calories and understand it, right? And we have every tool in the world. It's the easiest time in the world to do it. You just pick up your phone, you scan it, you'll find an app, you'll type it into Google, you'll type it into ChatGPT, whatever it may be, you'll find the information. But it's if the individual actually wants to receive the information, because it can hurt.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's when, you know, again, we know fat loss is so much more than just, you know, just nutrition in this podcast, right?
Yep.
You know, it comes down to, you know, emotional eating and there are other triggers and things like that, which obviously play a massive part. But going back, I think, you know, to help mitigate these type of things, I think one thing or the main thing we really need to talk about is protein. So I like to use the saying that obviously calories are king, but protein is queen. So when we talk...
Haven't heard that one before.
Yeah, so when we talk specifically about calories, we really want to think protein, calories and protein. If you're going to track anything, at minimum, I would say you're going to track calories and you're going to track protein. So protein's going to do a few different things. So I want to use a quick example in terms of, we call it thermic effective feeding, which is basically you're still burning calories as you're digesting food. So say someone is consuming 2,000 calories from whatever macronutrients they want, and maybe they're getting 50 grams of protein in, right? And now they change it and they're having 150 grams of protein, right? That extra, what's the math? Another 100 grams of protein, another 400 calories. So that 400 calorie difference, for example, they could be burning potentially 20, 30% more from protein than other macronutrients. So, you know, over the course of the day, it's going to make fuck all difference, right? But over the course of a couple of months and even years, it's actually going to make a big significant difference to just burning a few more calories while you're digesting food, which you're going to be eating food anyway. So why would you not want to get a bit more from protein, which is obviously going to help that. And then you've got the other two benefits, obviously, which are going to be higher satiation. So you're not going to feel like snacking in between meals.
Which saves you more calories.
Exactly right. And then, of course, you've got obviously retaining and building lean muscle tissue. And we will generally find the more muscle tissue we have, the less fat mass we have. So it's a bit of a triple whammy. You know, there's a reason why everyone harps on about it. But then it also comes to, I guess, like good quality sources of protein, which I want you to touch on as well.
Well, there's actually heaps of good quality sources of protein, and look, we don't need to make it complicated, right? Just, some form of meat or poultry. Eggs is really good. Whey protein powders are super convenient. Now, I won't go too deep into the nutritional information and the digestive issues and all that stuff. I don't know if you saw it. I just made a video on a specific whey protein about that. But if you're talking about that, it's good sources, right? Like, it's fine. Yes, you can get it from like plant sources and lentils and stuff, but it just makes it a lot harder because you have to eat a lot more voluminous foods to get that in. And a lot of people aren't eating like 500 grams of lentils to get their protein in.
Yeah, and I think with being vegetarian as well, like what happens is you don't get what you call complete proteins. Mm-hmm. So generally they are incomplete proteins, which means they don't have a full spectrum of amino acids. And generally speaking, to build as much muscle as possible or have the protein complete, you need to have that full spectrum. So for a vegetarian, you might have to combine two different sources. So it might be like rice and beans, for example, to get a full complete amino acid profile. And I think a lot of, even vegetarians and vegans don't actually realize that. And of course, we recommend probably for vegetarian, unless you're really, really good and in tune with what you're doing, probably taking some sort of protein supplement.
Yes.
Creatine would be fantastic for a vegetarian, vegan as well.
Yep.
They'll light up like a Christmas tree.
But not only that, right? Like, where would you be getting your B vitamins and iron from? Yeah. And look, this will be a side tangent, but I see it too often. So many times, and look, this isn't discriminating, but like I've seen that women are very susceptible to thinking that veganism is a lot healthier for them. Mm. And throughout the long term, their B vitamin, like their folate levels deplete, their iron depletes, they lose their period. They're like, what's going on? They get all these gut issues. And then, we look through their bloods and we have to start reversing it and, supplementing with methylfolate and desiccated spleen and stuff for iron up inhibition, and then also lactoferrin, which comes from certain milk and whey protein powders. But that's a side tangent there.
We'll do another podcast on that.
We can do another podcast on that, but it's really important to understand that nutritional information. And if we're talking about nutrition for fat loss, right, which is the whole point of this podcast, the nutritional information and the micronutrients and stuff you need to understand as well. It's not just the protein, carbs, and fats. Yes, the ratios of them in a day-to-day will dictate how you look, but when we talk about like if we're going to dictate how we feel and how we respond to certain things, and especially if we're looking at a long period of time where certain vitamins and minerals can deplete on certain diets, and this is why we want to touch on the subject, and we'll go back into it for you, is why we don't want to be doing a fat loss for a long period of time.
Yeah, and it's funny, like you mentioned, like I mentioned earlier, the carnivore diet, and it's like, what's that mean? Paul Salandino. That's the one.
Yep.
So long story short, he went on the carnivore, wrote a book about it, did all this, said it was amazing. Within 2 years, he got all these bloods done and he's basically like fucked. And now he's basically gone the complete opposite way. So
thyroid hormone was gone to shit with the antibodies. His testosterone went to shit. He was losing his hair. All this stuff. And
this is the thing,
he had to add 300 grams of carbs coming from honey to get all his markers back in.
And this is the thing, it's like, all these diets, all these different things, especially when it comes to nutritional diets for fat loss, they're all going to do one thing, right? They're going to put you in a calorie deficit, and they're going to try and do it in the fastest, quick, most unsustainable way probably possible. Mm-hmm. But the problem is people get married to these diets, and then they stay like that for the rest of their lives until there becomes serious health issues or consequences. So guys, if you are going to do one of these fad diets, it is fine to do for a period of time if that helps you eat for fat loss, provided protein is still there, provided you're doing all the right things. But I would strongly recommend obviously learning to track calories, doing the right thing there, and then not staying in a fat loss phase for too long. So do you want to talk about what happens when, like, let's say someone's been dieting for maybe like 30 weeks, right? Like what would you see? Yeah, what would you see in the blood work that's happened there?
Well,
or they've been trying to, right?
It wouldn't just be the blood work, right? So, blood work, you definitely see a lot of things start to deplete. You'd probably see liver enzymes increase actually, just due to the oxidative stress. You'd see their inflammation markers maybe a little bit elevated. Their testosterone markers would be in the absolute gutter if someone's been dieting chronically for that low. And then the cortisol would be all over the place, but I still don't like testing cortisol in a blood test. I don't think it's as accurate as people make it out to be.
Yeah, I think people can, they'll do the test and they're freaking out about the test.
Yeah, so like for example, right, like your cortisol's supposed to be the highest in the morning. Yeah. And when do you get a blood test?
Normally first thing.
First thing in the morning. Fasted in the morning. So look, when the cortisol is actually too low, that's a red flag because it means you're not actually producing that energetical stress response in the morning that you should be. And when you've actually been under a chronic amount of stress for so long, that's when the cortisol and the adrenal glands can actually shit themselves.
Yeah.
So kidney function, all that stuff can start to decrease. But the quality of life stuff, it's not just the blood work. The quality of life stuff is what really gets me when you've been in a fat loss phase for so long. One, it's like, are you still actually seeing results in the mirror? Like, you know, after 30 weeks, you'd probably be doing a bodybuilding show at that point. Like, yeah, that's a bodybuilding prep, 24 weeks max, around there, 6 months we're talking. So I would look at like, okay, what's your relationships like? What's your sleep like? Because insomnia is a really big thing. If you've been dieting for that long, your body's been in such a stress state for that long, it doesn't know how to relax. And this is where binge eating disorders and all that stuff can come into play. So there's a whole cascade of things where it can affect like your energy balance as well. Like you're just fatigued all the time for no reason. And it's like, hey, you just need 50 grams more carbs. Sweet, you get that in. Yes, you are metabolically flexible, so you can get that energy in. But then 2 hours later, your blood sugar crashes and you need that extra 50 grams of carbs again. And when someone's dieting, yeah, they're just pushing past it.
Yeah. I think one thing I want to touch on is sort of going back to, you know, the macronutrients and things like that. If we're looking at like, say, setting up a like a fat loss phase, right? Obviously, what I'd like to do is just in terms of we're purely just talking nutrition here. We're going to set protein probably around 2 grams per kilo of body weight. Can go higher, can go slightly lower. Depends on the person, what their body weight is, what they're doing, right? We probably want fats to say a minimum of what, 0.5 to 0.7, 0.8 grams, depending on the person.
Depends on the gender as well.
Yeah, I'd say women a little bit higher, maybe up to 1.
Higher.
Yeah. So let's say guys, let's say 0.7 and females up to probably 1. But you can probably go around that area. And then that last sort of part in terms of carbohydrates, I'd just fill the rest of the calories with carbs. Yeah. And as a bonus, if you can keep them more specifically around your workouts, pre and post workout, or get a majority of your carbs around that time, I think especially when you're in a fat loss phase, so you're already in a deficit, that's really going to help with obviously pushing yourself in the gym and then getting getting the carbs in to be able to help with recovery straight away, because that's going to give you the best bang for your buck in terms of body composition. Again, is it going to be
less risk of muscle loss as well?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like from a looking in the mirror perspective, it's like if you're just pure fat loss, you don't give a shit about muscle, well, you can sort of do what you want, right? But the problem is you might lose 10 kilos and 5 kilos of it will be muscle.
Yep.
And you've probably seen those transformation photos of people losing 10 kilos, but they look worse in the second photo. That's because they've lost a lot of lean muscle tissue and unfortunately have been dieting the wrong way and not the way I've just explained then. Oh, cool. Sorry, I'm still talking.
I thought you were going somewhere from that.
No, sweet. Anything else to cover?
No, I think we've covered everything, right? Like, look, it's not just as simple as calorie deficit and nutrition for fat loss. There's a lot of stuff that goes into play with your specific body, like how you respond to food, your emotional relationship with food, the nutritional information with food, all that stuff. But it's like, you can't neglect doing the work and holding yourself accountable. Yeah. It's got to be done regardless when you're trying to lose fat. Yeah. You have to be accountable for your decisions. You're accountable for the information that you should know, you have access to. This is why people hire coaches. There's so many people. I had a chat to a mate a couple of weeks ago and he's like, I know if I just pay you, I'll do it. Yeah. Because he knows the information, right? Yeah. He knows exactly what he needs to do.
You can go on ChatGPT now, make me a meal plan of this and get it printed out, right?
Everyone knows what they need to do. They know if they've got a bad habit they've got to get rid of. They know if they're eating too much food. They know if they've got loss of control when it comes to their relationship with food. Like, they know these things, but they just need some extra motivation or whatever it may be, an extra source of accountability or support to actually get rid of it, right? Because a lot of people don't have a support network. Maybe, especially we see this in social events, right? Someone goes on a diet and all of a sudden they're the boring person because they don't want to go out and drink one weekend, or they can't go out to eat at this cafe, or they can't go out for pizza night or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's like, it just goes back to, so much more than obviously just nutrition, but a couple of sort of strategies that I feel like I've helped my clients a lot that I can leave you guys with, just in terms of helping a fat loss phase and making it a bit better is, number one, you can delay your first meal a little bit longer. Again, probably depends if you're training in the morning as well, but having black coffee is really going to help obviously try and just suppress that appetite. Obviously, just be careful about having it too late into the night, because then that's going to obviously impact your sleep. So I like to say 8 hours before bed.
Into the night.
Yeah. 8 hours before bed is ideal. So, if you can cut it off by 2 p.m, if you go to bed at 10, for example, that's probably, when you should have your last coffee. And again, we know coffee contains calories if you have it with milk and it's like a milkshake. So try and make sure it's black or just with like a little shot of milk. Another thing I would recommend, and I feel like this is it's just so big, is preparation. And like, it's not just about meal prep. It's about thinking, okay, the night before, what am I having the next day? What's my diet looking like? Because if you can't tell yourself that or have a pretty clear picture, then all of a sudden you're behind the eight ball. Shit, what do I have in the morning? What's healthy to grab? Or you're plugging stuff into MyFitnessPal. It gets to dinner and you're like, I have 300 calories because I, couldn't prepare myself and I'm not sure what's going on.
Yep.
So meal prep and planning ahead is massive. And the last point I'll make is literally just water. So a lot of people think they're hungry, they're literally dehydrated.
Yep.
Having a glass of water 15 minutes before a meal, having a glass 15 minutes after a meal, those are 3 strategies that I guarantee if you implemented all them and you were taking into account everything that we've sort of told you so far in this podcast, you'd make some great progress in terms of fat loss.
Yeah, I gave an equation the other day. It's a simple one that I use with clients. It's for every 1,000 calories you consume, drink 1.5 litres of water. Really easy. You consume 2,000 calories, drink 3 litres of water that day.
Yeah.
You consume 3,000, drink 4.5. Gut motility really helps with nutrient partitioning and drinking water. And then we get all the regulations that we talk about, the satiation, hunger hormones, all of that stuff.
Yeah. And the last thing I will touch on that we, obviously when it comes to carbohydrates, is obviously carbohydrates are fantastic and fiber's a part of that. So a lot of people especially blokes, right? We do not get a lot of fiber because we just sort of want to eat whatever, not as much fruit and vegetables. So really want to have a look, especially if you're tracking on MyFitnessPal, pay attention to your fiber intake. So I would say at a minimum 10 to 15 grams for every 1,000 calories, I think is a really good sort of ballpark for most people. But for example, my coach has got me, pushing 30, 40 grams, most days, just from, again, nutrient partitioning standpoint, micronutrition, because the better you feel, the easier your diet's going to be, the more you're going to adhere to it, and the better results you're going to get.
Yeah, I mean, mood's a big thing. If you feel like shit all day, but you're on a diet, it's like, you're not going to stick with it long enough.
Takes 1 second to crack.
Because willpower depletes over time and you're like, I'm just depressed all day. Like maybe that extra 200 calories I had is worth just feeling better all day. And it really depends on your goals. I will say, lastly, do you want to touch on any supplements for fat loss?
Yeah, so I think, in terms of obviously when we go from a nutrition standpoint, like I said, fiber's that sort of big thing where I really, really like. And, probably from a potentially aiding fat loss, you could think about some greens as well, like a greens powder or something if you're not getting as much in. From a pure fat loss perspective.
I'd argue against that one.
Yeah, there you go. Well, so, there you go.
There's a lot of greens powders that are actually just garbage.
Oh shit, for sure.
A lot of them are loaded with heavy metals as well now that's coming out. I saw a study that AG1
green,
had 9 times the amount of lead that was FDA approved, which is interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
But back to supplements, I would say, L-carnitine's one that's been a bit not iffy, but it probably can potentially help a little bit in terms of the fat loss production. But at the end of the day, I'm always going back to, creatine monohydrate, caffeine, and just getting, if you need to, some whey protein. And I think they're the sort of keys, but I would probably also vitamin D and fish oil are probably 2 I'd add in as well.
I'd add in zinc as well.
Correct, yeah.
Zinc's really good for testosterone. It works on the same transport chain as vitamin D and magnesium, and then also your fish oil. I would argue cod liver oil is better just from the vitamin A content and the omega-3 ratio to omega-6. But hey, it's still good.
Yes,
if you're taking a fish oil, still take it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
L-carnitine, if you want to get it naturally through food, grass-fed red meat. There you go. It's the highest bioavailable form of it.
Yeah. Sweet. I think that's pretty much everything we need to cover in terms of nutrition for fat loss, guys. But again, if you guys have any questions, please get in touch with us over on Instagram on Action Fitness Nutrition or at Coach Liam C. Murphy. But until next